I thought about titling this segment The ABCs of Keeping Kids Safe, but I decided instead to focus on the one, two, threes. These are the three things that you have to keep in mind if you really want to keep kids safe, if you really want to identify the true problems having to do, sorry, windows open, beautiful day here in Northern Virginia. The three things that you have to do to keep people safe, children safe. The first thing you have to do that, and these are things that you never hear about anyone else talk about, you never hear the police or the media talking about. And the very first thing is to identify the true nature of child predation. Where does it occur? When does it occur? How does it occur? Why does it occur? And then develop a real strategy to deal with it. That's what you have to do. What is the nature of it, first of all? What is it and what is it not? Are we talking about urinating in the forest and a child seeing you? Is that child predation? Can a child who's 9 years old, who's acting out in class and pulls down the pants of another child, is that child predation? Because these are two examples that have been considered to be, at some level, child predation. What is the true nature of child predation if you want to keep kids safe? What does it really look like? And based on what we've seen so far in later years here, more recently, police and others have tried to get bills passed to expand the definition to be so broad that anything they say might well count as child predation. Grandma having a picture on her mantle with two children, her grandchildren, nude in the tub, playing with rubber duckies and laughing and having a great time, could possibly be construed as child predation, child pornography. Child sex abuse materials is another term they like to use, if somebody says so. And that's really it. We have to get down to the real nature of what is child predation. The second thing we have to do is we have to be honest about the numbers. Police are never honest about the numbers. They try to twist the numbers all around, and the media shills go along with it. What are the stats of the true victims, the true perpetrators? And no conflation. You can't go and arrest perpetrators for trafficking children and then also write the statistics down saying it's child prostitution and we arrested these children for prostitution. You can't have it both ways. You can't double count it, as police like to do sometimes. You cannot do that, okay? And many of the ads that are out there that perpetuate this myth that child predation is going on are really the personae of police on these dating sites. And what would happen if they weren't on those dating sites? And that's really this third step right there, is to, if you want to get a handle on real child predation, you have to not only define the true nature of what a child predation, child predator really is, where real abuse is occurring, and you have to be honest about the numbers and really disaggregate them down in the weeds, like some of our more appropriate and independent and nonpartisan, unbiased studies have done. And then what you have to do is you have to stop the dishonest, proactive stings, particularly those stings on dating sites. Why? Because they're fraught with all manner of difficulty. If police are working that hard to get people ensnared in their little schemes, whereas the deep and dark web, they know they are people there trying to go after children, then that suggests something more than just trying to stop predation. That suggests that you're deliberately trying to set people up, as we have been saying all along, to try and bolster your statistics and have money come into the equation. So once you straighten that out, where you even it out, you say, well, we're not going to do this. This is a little questionable. We're not going to do that. You pare it back. Now you can start seeing a truer picture of what is actually going on out there, okay? You identify the nature of true child predation. You're honest about the statistics, no conflating numbers, no pretending this, no double counting that, no using loaded language that doesn't really say anything. And then you stop the dishonest proactive stings from occurring in online dating sites. Why? Because it confuses the matter of predation, because it ignores the role of true perps. And we'll talk more about that later on here. Because it destroys the lives of people for no real reason. People otherwise innocent. It goes after people not at all on the deep and dark web where police keep telling us are the worst of the worst. And it counts smack talk, people giving each other a hard time on the dating platforms, people who play sexual role play games, people who don't believe that they're being set up. And it lumps them all together with the worst of the worst so that we can get a true nature of what's really going on. And the worst part about having these three ABCs or 1, 2, 3 is ignored is that it empowers trolls and vigilante groups to hunt down people and to make it even worse on everybody concerned while they pat themselves on the back that they're somehow helping some child out there. And over again, we don't see that occurring. Jen Marie from Citizens Against Government Entrapment, I want to give her a shout out because she provides an article from the University of Southern California, Gould, a study indicating something very interesting. The study is called Over-Policing Sex Trafficking, how the United States law enforcement should reform operations. This is in the International Human Rights Clinic Journal of 2021. And it lists a number of recommendations. I'm going to list 4 or 5 of them here. This is about over-policing sex trafficking and how law enforcement should reform their operations. Suggestion number 1, law enforcement traumatizes victims. It disempowers people and it lowers trust with law enforcement between the public and law enforcement through a complex rescue operation when community help and public health approaches would be better to solve the problem. So in other words, if you are on there and you are supposedly talking inappropriately to a purported young person, is it a better idea to put them in jail for 10, 12, 20, 30 years as police have done, or is it better to get them some mental health? Which would be better? They suggest mental help or community help. Okay, that's where the restorative justice programs that people like Caitlin Grimley of nearby Fauquier County has availed herself of here, and that's probably a good choice. Although, to be fair, Miss Caitlin Grimley actually had sex with children and will pay no price, whereas people who had no sex with children pay an ultimate horrible price of great many years in incarceration. It talks about attention deficit disorders, police propaganda, news reports, and dishonest news conferences, all conflating information instead of doing what I had suggested very, very clearly, just being honest with the numbers. A second recommendation is to redirect funding to evidence-based methods that reveal true victims and not fake victims, and also to conduct strict police training. One of those bits of training should certainly be on the Constitution and on the Fourth Amendment, which police routinely say they do not know anything about, nor do they care. Detective Sergeant Bauer, Robert M. Bauer in my case, didn't know anything about the Constitution when we asked him about it, didn't know anything about the Fourth Amendment, and didn't seem particularly concerned. He told us August 17th, 2019, that he did not receive any training on it whatsoever. A third recommendation of the over-policing article here is to increase oversight and transparency among the police. Well, that's interesting. We have several civilian police oversight boards, 9 in Virginia, and we have many more police agencies out there. We need more oversight. We need more people looking over the police shoulder in an appropriate way, not interfering with investigations, but understanding that we're a democratic republic and that they police based on what the public wants. Not the segment of the population they always want to defer to, but the whole population. 4, strengthen prevention efforts and reduce the vulnerability of potential victims. What are we doing about real victims? Not fake victims. How are we helping real victims? I.C.A.C claims they do this by a coordinated effort in schools, a schools-based program that talks to people about being safe online. And yet, in my 30 years in education, I've not one time seen an I.C.A.C police force in any of the schools in which I have served talking about online safety. I have seen programs, but they weren't I.C.A.C related programs, and they were very, very few by certain people in police. So I'll back off on that a little bit, but there weren't I.C.A.C approved programs because we've looked at those programs and they are not what gets brought up in front of an audience of children. Okay? Certainly they don't tell the public what they're up to in a public relations campaign. One solution is to understand the nature of entrapment as both a legal and a civil defense, and ask why the police are on sites to begin with if the results are so mixed. And maybe that's a question that we need to be asking them as the public, and why they aren't meeting with us to explain that to us. Is this very effective, this legal entrapment versus the common public understanding of it? People think that entrapment is one thing, but in fact, entrapment is a legal defense that suggests that you were first guilty. When we're talking about entrapment, we're talking about a public understanding of entrapment where the police are actually creating the crime around you. Okay? And we can see this discussed in certain scholarly articles, such as by Hill, McLeod, and Tanji. They discuss this in the International Journal of Criminal Law and Philosophy, Volume 12, Number 4, in 2018. And they say the public doesn't like to be misled, and they don't understand the numbers, something that we have been saying all along here through I.C.A.C Unpacked and also through the Citizens Against Government Entrapment, HEAL, Humanizing, Educating, Advocating, and Legislating for real change to how the sex offender laws work and sexual stigma. And police accountability is very low. Since 2021, when the local Virginia communities established civilian oversight, as I said, only 9 individual jurisdictions are actually being policed. So attention should shift to reactive stings and abandon proactive stings, at least until we can get a handle on what's going on and they can spend their money and time and energy on the deep and dark web. Of course, they won't do this because that would put their statistics into a nosedive, and it will look like they're not doing their job, when in fact they will be doing their job in a real way the very first time. Okay? Most child endangerment does not occur through proactive stings, the article found. I.C.A.C and Net Nanny has collected over $500 million of public money and rescued no one as far as we know, nor are they open and honest about their stats. We've talked about that too. They ignore their own house as well and claim officers need some kind of therapy for the child pornography that they view. And yet they will not disclose the numbers. Who are these cops? What sort of exposure do they have? What sort of training do they get? What sort of therapy do they get? None of these things are disclosed at all. We are left to take their word for all of it. They fight, the police do, any bill that might regulate them. In Virginia, even training or having public input into training or into any kind of reasonable restraint or community buy-in, they fight constantly. We need to recognize that law enforcement is part of the problem, not part of the solution. And because they are addicted to federal grant money, they're not going to get the outcome that serves the public's greater need. And again, for those trolls who are looking at this, if you manage to make 14 and 30 seconds into this video, you're saying to yourself, oh, it doesn't matter because you're guilty. We found, fine. No problem. But all I'm asking you to do is be a little more ingenuous with your statistics and not as disingenuous as you have been. That's all. You know, police are very bad at policing themselves. Whereas for the rest of us, they trot out police reports and nonstop coverage for days on end, and they go back and they revisit it. They very rarely do that with police. It has to be a pretty heinous crime. Well, consider in May 30th of this year in Farmington, Missouri, a St. Francis sheriff's deputy and his wife were arrested for attempted sex trafficking of a minor. The man, the deputy sheriff, 39 years old, is standing defiantly like this in his mugshot with his arms folded, glaring at the camera. This is David and Carly, Karlie Blankenship. You can look them up. You don't have to take my word for it. Miami Herald reports on May 30th, 2020, that an officer filmed a teen, 17 years old, in a sex act with a 18-year-old. This officer was 24 years old, and then the 24-year-old officer sent the video to his coworkers. He plied the children with alcohol and THC and vape pen. He directed the 17-year-old on what to do with the 18-year-old, and the charges include use of an official radio, 4 counts of providing alcohol to a minor, 2 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Hey, I'm curious to know how much jail time he's going to get on that one. Who knows? But very often they get far less than what the general public does. So, text also from Tim Ballard from Sound of Freedom and Operation Underground Railroad, OROUR, excuse me. Boy, I'll tell you, you can look at that in the document cloud, and you can see the Rolling Stone magazine article of February 23rd, 24, and you can actually read the texts. And they're pretty raw, they're pretty sexualized, and yet he has the audacity to make the video talking about what a hero he is, doing public appearances talking about the hero he is, and thank God there's been considerable media coverage, but he's had a good run. He started out working for the government, writing his book on government time, and then he went on to actually molest a number of children himself and appears to have gotten away with it as well. So we have a lot of these bait and switch ads that the police like to use against the rest of us, claiming that a person is 18 or 19 and then switching it up and saying 15 or 16 or even 14 or 13 and getting away with it. And then, of course, the claims that police like to use, equally dishonest on these proactive sex things, that had police not been there, there surely would have been a worse situation. There surely would have been victims, but we were there, and because we were there, no victims. Well, you'd have to believe that, I suppose, but the problem is they bring the bait and they bring the whole scheme. And what if they weren't there at all? Excuse me, in my case, if they had not been there, there wouldn't have been a problem. If they had gone away, there wouldn't have been an issue. I never would have shown up. I didn't have anything with me. There was no sex talk, and there was no pictures except one that showed up after the phone was out of my custody and control. Was I the best person that they should create this with and destroy a life? Was Stephen Kilpatrick, a professor of physics, out on the other side of the state, was that the right person to go after? Or was it better to be on the deep and dark web where people do the most heinous things to children and traffic them around the world? Was that the best use of resources? Well, Inside Nova in just a few days ago, on the 9th of June, reports that 5 persons each day die of fentanyl exposure. That's surely something cops need to address. They could take people off of these proactive stings and deal with that very real issue. Thefts of cars seem to be up. Property damage seems to be up. I hear about it almost every day on Nextdoor, and yet, interestingly enough, we don't seem to have much police action there. So there's a misguided and misunderstood methodology that police used, and they mislead the public by basing the entire operation on a sense of fear. Fear that there's a pervert behind every bush and that somebody's doing something or wants to do something with your child if only they have an opportunity to do that. It stokes public fear, and it muddles serious issues, and most importantly of all, it creates really, really bad public policy. There was an article in the American Psychologist about 2008. Okay, some 20 years and more. The February-March edition, and it's called "Online Predators," quote unquote, and Their Victims: Myths, Realities, and Implications for Prevention and Treatment by Janice Willock, I think it is. I'm trying to read my own writing. The first lines I will close with because they're very instructive. The first lines say, "The publicity about online predators who prey on naive children using trickery and violence is largely inaccurate. The reality about internet-initiated sex crimes, those in which sex offenders meet juveniles online, is different. It's more complex and it's serious, but less archetypally frightening than the publicity about those crimes suggest." So in other words, stoking fear is what's creating the perception, not real numbers, not disaggregated numbers, not a clear, consistent, concise, and meaningful understanding to the public about what's really going on. And this is why we can't trust when the police tell us some story. This is why when we have a media account, we need to question the language and the verbiage and how well it's been sourced. And this is why when we are asked to pony up a lot more money for these things, or to be tolerant of vigilante groups and tolerant of trolls attacking us, that we must understand that it's all part of the echo chamber. And instead what we need is the truth. And with that, I'm Norman Michaelation, and this is I.C.A.C. Unpacked. Have a good day.